Hello, I'm Dr. Jim Fogler. We're going to talk about rational guilt, irrational guilt, and loving corrections. Loving corrections. Now, rational guilt. Everybody should be teaching this to their kid. My generation got taught well with rational guilt. But I heard somebody say this to me, usually Dad. Jimmy, this is one of those times you should feel bad. And if you don't feel bad, I'll wait for you to get there. Okay? And he's doing appropriate guilt training. In other words, I did something that I should feel bad about, and I'm young and I don't know it. And then he's telling me you should feel this bad feeling. Not overwhelming, but you should feel this bad feeling. That's rational guilt. In other words, if I hurt somebody, I should feel guilty about that. If I intentionally do something bad to somebody, I should feel bad about that. That's rational guilt. But there's also irrational guilt, and a lot of abuse victims have that. Now, they think it's coming from themselves, but it's not coming from themselves. It's coming from the folks that put it in their head. And so usually that's the abusive parent and the people around him sometimes too. Some people around him are kind of like connected with him in certain ways, and they'll promote that irrational guilt too. Now, rational guilt is different. You didn't do anything wrong, but somebody trained you to feel real bad anyway. They usually do that to manipulate you. If you're being abused, they usually use that to make you keep your mouth shut. You'll be a bad person, the family will be destroyed, it'll be all your fault if you tell the police or anybody at school that I did these things to you, whatever it might be, abuse, whatever it is. So anyway, what we're looking at is sorting that out. Jesus never uses irrational guilt. So if you hear any irrational guilt coming at you, it's not coming from him. And it's not coming from you, it's coming from the folks that hurt you in the first place and trained you to feel guilty. So that's what the irrational guilt is. Jesus is all about rational guilt. And he doesn't come to you with a condemning voice at all. What he does instead, he comes with something very different. He comes with loving correction. Loving correction. Well, my dad used to do this. He said, now, Jim, here's what you got to do. You got to go back and you have to correct this thing. And this is how you should correct it. And I'd go, no, Dad, I'm not going to do that. This is the 1950s. Bam on the butt. You should go. You should, and no post-traumatic. Us kids in the 50s had no post-traumatic from a spanking. I know kids are being beaten, and I'm not advocating that at all. But at the same time, it worked. Because I started feeling bad. And so what we did then is, he'd say, here's what you need to do. He's spelling out how to make a correction. And then after you do that correction, then you should feel appropriately good. And now it's okay. Now you're past that. I mean, that's what confession is all about, right? And so that's what we're looking at. And so irrational guilt, when you hear that, a lot of people think, I really put myself down. You're not putting yourself down. You're hearing the messages from the people of the past that put you down. That's my little dog. I want to have a whole segment on my dogs because people ask, why do my dogs roam around the house when I'm doing this? Because they live here. Well, more than I do. So they get to stay and do whatever the heck they want to do as well. That just seems like appropriate consequences. But at the same time, that irrational guilt is not coming from you. That's the important piece. If you can keep that message in your head, it's easier to fight irrational guilt. It's not coming from you. It's coming from these folks that hurt you instead. Rational guilt, yes, I did something wrong. Yes, I got to fix it. Or yes, I got to commit never to do it again. And that's an important piece. But if you pray, what will come to you is a loving correction that Jesus will give you. And you can, if you do that, that would help too, tremendously. I had a priest once who said to me, I want you to go out and think about 20 people who did wonderful things for you. And I went out and I did that. I thought, oh, okay, come out of confession. But I thought, he told me to do it, I'm going to do it. And so I did that. And when I was all done, I just had this beautiful feeling, and it was absolutely incredible with this too. And see, that's where the confession part comes in, that you clean this out, and it doesn't have to keep bothering you and running rampant with guilt. Because here's the concern. Appropriate rational guilt can sometimes turn into irrational guilt if we don't fix this stuff. Because then we'll make excuses why we're not doing it, and then eventually we never really get rid of that guilt, and we're beating ourselves up instead of the person or anybody else around, that kind of thing. But you're hurting yourself is what I'm trying to say. So Remember that. Irrational guilt is not you saying these things to you in your head. Rational guilt is where we get a message from somebody else or from us or from God that we did something wrong that we need to correct. And if you pray, you'll get loving correction from Jesus Christ. So let's kick out that irrational guilt, pull in the rational guilt, and get them loving corrections going, because we all got flaws and we've all hurt folks. You take care of yourself. God bless. And Father and Son and the Holy Spirit, you'll get rid of that irrational guilt.